All right, Boram, welcome to Keys to the Shop. Such a pleasure to have you here. How's it going?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invite. It's a huge pleasure to be here, Chris, and really nice to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you as well. And you have just not stopped running around the world since your win, and congratulations, big congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been quite a crazy schedule. It's something very far from what I imagined. I just arrived in Madrid for Madrid Coffee Fest, but it's been a very exciting experience. Been seeing so many different coffee cultures, business models everywhere in the world. So I think hopefully it will be very important insights for me in my future coffee career.
Oh, that's a really great point. I mean, the fact that you get to have this kind of perspective, you can see it online and you can say, oh yeah, that looks a little different, or that looks really cool, but being there in person has got to be such a different experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think last year I spent most of the time in Asia, and it's just incredible how every single country has such a unique coffee culture and coffee experience and different business models. And I think it's just a testament of how diverse our industry is. So I'm excited to spend a few days here in Europe now and see how things have changed. So it's just a very cool experience to be on the ground and seeing how consumers work here.
I think we lost you there, Borum.
Okay.
uh, your audio cut out. Really cool chance to be on the
Okay.
ground.
Hmm.
Let's see
Hopefully
if
the
sorry,
hotel
there's a
hotel internet will stay good.
yeah. Let me have you pick it up from where you just were and say,
Hmm.
and we'll edit this for video as well. Um,
Okay.
it's a different experience being on the ground. Do you remember what you said after
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely a very unique experience to see how consumers work in these different countries, especially from what I've seen in Asia last year. So I'm excited to be here in Europe now for the next few days and hopefully see how the market has evolved and how things have changed around here.
Yeah. So here's where we all start with these interviews. There's a story behind how you became a globe-trotting barista, farmer, champion, and people just don't wake up one day and find themselves on airplanes traveling to coffee festivals. And so this is something that you've been working hard on through competition and through the company that your family has run, and now you're one of their leaders, the main leaders there at and so I want you to kind of start off telling us a little bit about how you grew up in coffee, and
Okay.
specifically how your story became your story and not just your family's story, where you became sort of like, this is my thing now. It's not just the family profession, it's my profession as well.
Of course, of course. The funny thing is a lot of people get this a little bit mixed up. And I think it's especially because Brazilian coffee producers are notorious for having multi-generational companies and the production side being passed over from generation. But in reality, our family only began in coffee really in 2011.
Oh,
Uh, so my dad he started exporting green beans around 2005 and got into green coffee business. And then he sort of decided that he wanted to uh, retire in a coffee plantation. He visited a few
okay.
farms at that time. So he was like, "Oh, this would be really interesting for me to retire." Like he's always been close to agriculture from his family back in Korea. So he was like, "This should be interesting for me to do once I retire." Obviously, he's not even close to being retired now because coffee farming is a huge amount of work. Uh, but I'm hoping he's thoroughly enjoying the experience. So we really started in coffee in 2011. Uh, at that time, I was still in college. I wasn't really involved with the coffee business.
Hmm.
I worked in a different industry for a few years before really getting into coffee.
What
But
industry was
overall,
that?
I worked in the consulting industry for 4 years after
Oh, nice.
college. Yeah. So more of a corporate job kind of experience, and then jumped into coffee because my family started needing help in terms of how to run the coffee farming and the export side first, especially because they acquired the farm in 2011. They started producing coffee, and they weren't really sure of how to reach the specialty market, especially because my dad was accustomed to working with the commercial market, which is a lot simpler in terms of business operations. But once he started producing coffee, he realized the farm itself couldn't really work or compete in the commodity business. So we quickly had to push for quality. So
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
joined
that
in
makes
in
sense.
2014. Yeah, I joined in 2014 as uh, helping with quality control. I got my Q grader certification, started tasting coffees, especially because I want to start trying to understand what this specialty coffee thing is really about and how I can
Yeah.
promote the coffees from the farm. And I got involved with the business from then on, and it's been about 8 years working fully with coffee now.
Okay, so coming from the consulting world, and I know it's specifically management consulting, that
Yeah.
you so obviously your schooling set you up to be able to view business problems through a certain lens that allowed you to see solutions, even though coffee farming isn't. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you're taking on clients in your consulting, I'm guessing you never had a coffee farm as one of your clients.
Yeah.
But yeah, so did it translate pretty well over to the farm? Did your schooling really help you see here's some of the frameworks or systems that we need to be able to bring ourselves into the era that we want to be in?
Absolutely. I think so. I worked in management consulting, but I was specifically focused in the finance industry. So we were creating financial products for Brazilian financial institutions in Brazil. And interesting enough, obviously, it had nothing to do with coffee. I learned a lot of interesting things in terms of creating processes and creating structure for be it a old business or a newly built business, and understanding what are the processes and steps in creating a new product. So a lot of those things definitely did help, and it definitely helped us shape the culture of our company and the culture of our employees and our partners and how they work with the objective of really pushing quality up, which has been our primary objective since we started.
Yeah, so let me ask then, when it comes to managing groups of people, and we've talked about this on the show prior and some years past about the complexity of managing things like farms or co-ops and the people, and just like a coffee shop, people in managing people is very difficult because there are personalities involved and there's
Yeah.
expectations, and then there's the systems that lead to caring for people, and that's a very dynamic process, way more dynamic than coffee actually, right?
Hmm.
And it'd be nice if there was like a queue for people, like being able to lead people. But in that pursuit of systems and applying good practices to increase quality, how did your how did your farm and how did you all change the way that you interacted with the people and the team that you had on the ground creating the coffee on the farm level?
So I think one of the biggest things that we learned through our experience has been knowledge and education, um, especially because for us, we are not traditional coffee farmers. We were not involved with coffee before. We're just plainly consumers. So I definitely felt the need to learn so many things about coffee, be it about extraction, roasting, and running a coffee business. So we have always highly invested on the educational side, not only for us, but for all of our team members, which eventually led us to opening our own coffee school in Brazil. So today we train and provide knowledge for all of our team members, but also to consumers. And I think it's a two-way positive impact in terms of improving quality uh, and product for us, especially because we're able to train better our staff to provide better service, but also we're able to educate a country that really doesn't consume specialty coffee yet. We're like in very early stage still in Brazil, I would say. So I think the educational concept has been truly one of the most important pillars, not only providing that kind of training for our staff members, but also for our consumers, for them to understand better the product, because this is how we believe today we can push our market. It's not really. I've had multiple discussions about this recently with many people around Asia who are running coffee businesses, but some of the biggest challenges we have today is that we run uh, specialty cafes today in a commercial model, right? Where we have to compete with commercial level cafes working with tighter margins, but really high volume. So we're focused on volume, but we're how can we focus on volume with such a high quality product? So I think some of the biggest challenges we have today is really about educating consumers so that we can improve margins for our businesses. And also with that, we have to up our level of customer service and focus a lot on customer experience.
So, does that mean for you one of the cornerstones of being able? It sounds like you're inferring that customers will pay more for coffee if there's a
Yeah.
better customer service experience attached to that coffee.
Yes, I definitely believe that. I think that is definitely one of the biggest goals that we have in our company and our cafes. So, for example, we focus on providing customer service on the table. And by this, I mean, for example, a customer orders a pour over. We have a barista go over to their table and prepare the pour over on their table. I know this is something that is mainly applied to our reality. I'm not sure how this would apply to different cafe models, but
Yeah.
we truly value the barista being able to showcase what we do at the farm level and why there's so much care and thought being put into the process of serving them coffee, especially because it's important for us to justify that we charge obviously much higher prices than commercial cafes, and this is how we're able to keep things afloat for our type of business model.
In your business model, you mentioned is something you've mentioned a couple of times: increasing quality and helping
Yeah,
people understand, I guess, what that means. If they're a consumer, you were a consumer of coffee
yeah.
before you became the producers of coffee. And so, how did you understand quality enough to know what the goal was? And then, what does quality mean now when it comes to educating a customer? What does it mean for them to have fully embraced quality? So you could say, we've done a good job of educating them about what quality means.
Of course. So yeah, I think one of the biggest things it's really having true understanding of what where the product is coming from. So for example, for me, one of my first experiences with specialty coffee was in college when I used to live in Boston, and I think it's the first time I tasted espresso, single origin espresso from Ethiopia. And I think it's obviously one of the most probably one of the most common first time specialty coffee experiences for a lot of people. And for me, it was like wow, learning about not only about the origin but understanding how that affected quality was really a level up in my experience of that coffee. And for us, early on when we started producing coffees, especially producing coffees in Brazil, who is the largest coffee producer and has uh, the amazing and huge reputation of producing a huge volume of coffees with specific flavor profiles. For us, is really a huge challenge to start producing coffee and trying to bring sort of a new image or a newer quality perspective for Brazilian coffees. I remember back in 2015 when I traveled for my first expos. I think probably 70% of the people I encountered, they would claim that there's no such thing as specialty Brazilian coffee. Uh, so
Wow.
saying that Brazil did not produce quality and it was impossible for Brazil to produce quality. And so those are some of the biggest challenges that we have to take on and understand that, well, like there's so much misinformation and lack of knowledge still in our market that we can really work on. And I think that's what quality really is about today for us. It's not only being able to come through in the quality of the cup and of the beverage, but also being able to uh, share all that knowledge with our consumers.
And if they're more knowledgeable about what goes on behind the scenes, they're going to care a little. They're more conscious as a consumer of what they purchase rather than just the volume utility coffee, which is helpful. Like not everything needs to be a 90 plus scoring coffee in order for it to be helpful. But
Mhm.
that conscientiousness really goes a long way for the systems that lead to those cups of coffee, right? So one of the things that
Yeah,
you are doing is running the cafes. They have cafes with your company, and so that adds another layer of feedback. And I'm wondering about that when it comes to how the farm produces coffee pre cafe versus post cafes, and what the feedback from consumer feedback and information gleaned from and data gleaned from the coffee shops has done to impact farming practices.
of course. So yeah, I think it's exactly like you said. It's the more knowledge the consumer has, the more value they will give to the product. And for us, when we started with the expo, when I started getting involved with the expo side and seeing how there was uh, a gap in terms of knowledge about high quality Brazilian coffees, it's when we decided that maybe we should start roasting and selling these coffees in Brazil. And Brazil being such a start level market for specialty coffee. And in my head, I was like, if I can convince Brazilian consumers about high end and high quality Brazilian coffees, I will gain enough knowledge to also be able to consume the external market. So the cafe and the roasting business sort of started with the idea of let's gain more knowledge about roasting our coffees and extracting them as well, so that we can share this knowledge as well with everyone else. Um, so back then, obviously, we were producing coffees very similar to what traditional coffee production has been in Brazil. So quick,
Right.
high volume production, drying coffee as quickly as you can, and obviously tasting out the differences in quality. And I think being able to have that immediate feedback with our own production, we started to understand better on how to roast our coffees better and what kind of taste profiles or flavor profiles we can push for espresso, for pour over. And I think it went sort of in the forward way of gaining that knowledge about roasting and extraction and then pushing that knowledge back into production. So let's push our Mundo Novo variety that we produce in this natural process. We know this coffee performs excellent in single origin espresso. We know how to roast this coffee this way. We can share this roasting profile with our consumers, with our importers. And today, I think that kind of feedback gives us a special connection with our roasters and with our clients all over the globe because we can really talk about uh, our products in a very specific knowledge base. Um, so today we have that knowledge in our production. Like we know our varietals and what processes work better and what kind of beverages and how to roast coffees from our Minas farm, different from roasting coffees from our Espiritu Santo farm. So I think that knowledge base has really changed not only the direction of what information we can give to our clients, but also on what we want to produce and what we want to develop more in the farm, what kind of varieties we want to explore, and I think today the feedback loop is sort of both ways.
That's wonderful. I'm curious about the why behind all of this, because there's this kind of amorphous goal of quality, like higher quality. And some of
Mhm.
what I'm thinking about is you've got a consumer base in Brazil who may be used to certain types of flavor profiles in coffee, maybe even really, really proud of the fact that they love this type of coffee. I'm actually drinking
Yeah.
a slightly dark roasted coffee right now that I know a lot of people
Mhm.
probably wouldn't like. But for me,
Yeah.
there's this nostalgic value to it. And I love when I get somebody to serve me who is serving me above an idea. And I'm curious how you balance the pursuit of quality from a global perspective, because you're plugged in to the global perspective of what specialty is, like the bleeding edge of what is going on in coffee,
Mhm.
but the ground level application and relevancy to the everyday consumer. How does that balance out so you don't go too far in the direction of novelty and let's see what we can do with coffee versus let's see who we can serve with coffee?
Mhm. Yeah, I think overall the experience is it's just like with running any kind of business. You don't have like a final answer in your head. You kind of go and you adjust your pathway as much as you can. For us, so for example in our cafes we started with like a super light roast pulp natural coffee um, that that gave so much acidity and really shocked a lot of the traditional customers for coffee in Brazil, especially because Brazil we consume so much espresso. Uh, so our idea was really to kind of disrupt that kind of traditional market. And luckily, since day one in 2016 until today, we have not changed our espresso profile. Our consumers
Oh,
have learned to really enjoy that, really enjoy high acidity and really nice citric flavors in our espresso. And obviously, we understand that we have to cater to all types of consumer base. So one of the challenges of Brazil also is that the fact that we cannot import other green beans, just like most coffee producing countries.
yeah.
So we are heavily focused working with Brazilian coffees only, and for us, we only work with our farm coffees, uh, which is even a narrower option base, I would say. Uh, but it's incredible because we're able to really create all types of flavor directions, I would say, or flavor profile directions within all of our coffees. So obviously we have the sweeter, lower acidity coffees that the traditional market is more accustomed to, and then we'll have like really high, sharp acidity, pulp naturals, our funky processed natural coffees as well. So it's really interesting to be able to offer a wide range, even with uh, our own production only.
Looks like I lost you
Okay.
there.
Yeah,
Um,
we're back.
okay. Uh, so we can have sweeter, more traditional, and that's
Yeah,
where I lost you.
sweeter. Okay, so we can have the sweeter and more the traditional chocolate nutty coffee flavors, but also we can have like really high acidic pulp naturals or really funky naturals. So it sort of pushed us to create multiple product bases. And I think that's a really interesting approach that we were able to create. But obviously, it's the idea of slowly developing that specialty market locally for us.
I like that. Yeah. So having that variety is really important. And it kind of brings us to one of the other things that we obviously need to talk about, which is competition.
Yeah.
Because as you have this perspective of somebody coming into the coffee industry, disrupting the coffee industry in Brazil a little bit, trying to advance quality, and education has always been a cornerstone of what you're trying to do. um,
Yeah.
when you're talking about competitions, it's a platform that is kind of about education, and it has become a little bit more, I think, a little bit more about competition in the past 10, 15 years. um, and so why did you start to, or when and why did you start to pursue barista competitions, and was it in the same vein in terms of goals for you as what we've just been talking about on the farm level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think competition has truly been an amazing blessing for us, especially because in our minds, when we started the company and started working with our cafe business, uh, our idea was how can we differentiate ourselves as coffee producers, coming from a coffee producing country, but also running cafe business, a retail business. And in our heads, we were thinking, hey, we really have to be cutting edge uh, on the consumer base and retail base. I think that will really differentiate us as coffee producers as well, because we'll be truly directly linked with the consumer base in that sense. Um, but when I started the cafe in 2016, I had no knowledge about running a cafe and very minimal barista knowledge. I'd done a few courses and extracted some espresso and some milk. And obviously, being from Brazil, it's still a highly not spread out profession. There's not a lot of baristas around for you to hire. So when we started in 2016, I remember hiring my two first staff members. They've never extracted coffee in their lives either. So I remember working with them for about 8 or 9 months, like doing full shifts in the cafe, um, taking care of service throughout the day, roasting coffee throughout the night, uh, and really trying to understand how can we jumpstart or quickly gain high amounts of knowledge in coffee, not only for me, but for our staff members as well. And I remember in 2015 traveling, seeing my first barista competition. It was in when Sasha Sestic won, and I felt like his presentation truly connected to me in many ways because he started talking about fermentation, carbonic maturation, and being a producer. I'm like, look, there's this barista bringing all these incredible scientific or information and incredible knowledge about coffee processing. Maybe that is the quick link that I can get into getting a huge amount of knowledge and experience. So in 2017, it's when I started first pushing our baristas to start competing in national level. And this is not me competing yet. This is mainly pushing our staff members to start competing because it's an interesting way for them to gain knowledge. Obviously, barista competition was still too complex for us, so we had baristas start competing in brewers competition in 2017, and it was amazing because the barista that I first hired, she had less than a year of experience in coffee, and she was able to reach third place in Brazilian Brewers Cup.
Wow. Yeah.
But I saw the amount of dedication. I accompanied her in a lot of that journey for her to learn better about coffee, to learn how to better brew coffee. So competition sort of started to be engraved in our company culture since the very beginning because we understood that not only this is an amazing way to gain knowledge for all of our team members, but it really pushes them to be curious about coffee. And by 2018, we already had like 3 or 4 competitors from our company participating in national level competitions.
Yeah.
So it was a huge knowledge gain. I saw our company quality and our barista quality improve dramatically, and which eventually pushed me to get into coffee competitions. Um, at first, I did not want to compete. I wasn't really fully interested in competing, especially because we're running a business. There's so many things to do.
Hmm.
And for me, it was definitely more valuable to push our team members to and support them. Like since the beginning, we have always fully supported our baristas to compete. Um, but then we realized that we sort of hit a knowledge wall. Like we weren't able to get the results that we wanted. Our baristas were always coming third multiple times in Brazil. So I realized that maybe there's lack of knowledge, not only for me in terms of competition. So back in 2019 is sort of when I decided maybe I'll give this a try, especially because there's probably a lot of knowledge that I can gain from competing myself, understanding what is my barista's point of view in competition, and that's sort of how it all started.
So then, in your first competition, is that when you
Yeah,
won your first title?
yes, in 2019, yes.
So
Just
your hypothesis here about maybe this is what I should be getting into, that it was true. Like that must have felt crazy to win in your first go at competition.
yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely we definitely worked really hard for it. I remember when decided that I would compete. The first thing I did was I volunteered at the WBC in 2019 in Boston,
Hmm.
and I worked backstage for 4 days, trying to see what world level competitions are doing, and since then on, I remember I started training really hard because I've never been on stage, and uh, I come from a family of two. So me and my brother, we have 1 year apart, and we have always been super competitive in sports since we're kids, like playing soccer, swimming. So I think it was sort of ingrained in our heads that okay, like we're gonna start competing, we have to start training, and this is like that kind of athlete mindset. You gotta do this every day and try to improve a little bit every day. So I remember training for over 6 months to compete on my first nationals.
Mm.
And I think I had a really strong theme. Most of my competition content have always been focused on what can I bring back to my farm level or to Brazil in terms of quality and what can I do to improve quality. So my first competition in 2019 was all about coffee fermentation. And it was back at a time where Brazil still coffee fermentation was a huge stigma in Brazil. We
Oh.
most coffee producers talked about fermentation as being a defect. Uh, you would get definitely like a weird eye if you said you were fermenting coffee because for them it's like, why are you purposely putting defect on your beans? Like, how are you gonna sell that? And I realized there was so much misinformation and lack of information about coffee fermentation. So that's something that I decided to tackle on while I was training to really
Okay.
understand what is fermentation really about. We have a World Barista Champion in 2015 talking about fermentation and reaching the pinnacle of quality. So there's definitely a lot of stuff that I could learn. So I pushed a lot on that side. I went to a trip in Colombia, visited coffee farmers in Colombia, did a fermentation course there. This is around the time where they were starting to do Q processing. So Q processing didn't really fully start in Colombia at that time, but the instructor who was beginning to teach that gave a fermentation course for other producers. So I was lucky enough to be able to go through that course and start experimenting a lot in our farm level as well. And incredibly, I was able to produce together with my father an amazing Mundo Novo lot that we felt like, okay, this is something that we can present in competition, and that's how I won my first competition in 2019.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
how did your father feel about all of this? I mean, there's been a lot of evolution, and we've talked a lot about what's happened in the farm, and getting quality raised and starting cafes. For your father's part, as this was something that he started, how
hmm
has up until this point where now you're the champion? What's his perspective on all this?
So it's funny, definitely working in a family environment. It has its interesting points, but my father has always been so focused on production, and our talks have always been involved. Like, okay, like I'm gonna focus on production, producing the best coffees that I can, and you have to sell them. I'm not gonna do anything outside of the farm gate.
Mm,
So having that kind of responsibility, I think that really pushed me to study more about the market and really understand how we can shape uh, public opinion on Brazilian coffees because um, even until 2018, 19, it was really hard to convince people about high quality Brazilian coffees on our perspective. So he was definitely thrilled. Like he was fully supportive when I decided to start competing because we understand that competition is not only the platform for you to gain a lot of knowledge, but also uh, it's those 15 minutes is the moment where your market is looking at you, right? And it's listening to you. So there's a huge message that you can bring out into the coffee world. And
hmm
I think that was a big opportunity for us to not only win in 2019, but also uh, kind of move the opinion of a lot of producers in Brazil about coffee fermentation. And today we see so many Brazilian producers also working heavily with coffee fermentation. And I think competition is an amazing platform for us to do that.
Yeah. And one of the things that people say a lot about competition, and we had Scott Connery on the show a couple weeks back. We all love Scott, and it's about what's possible with coffee. It is also the community of people that contribute to this um, deep bench of ideas that you can draw from to bring, like you said, bring back to Brazil.
Mhm.
This you went to Colombia and you took a class. I mean, this is not just it's cross pollination of ideas at the barista level, but it's also the same origin to origin. The accessibility we have now for that kind of thing through competition feels like a real benefit that can move the industry forward.
Yes, absolutely. I think without competition, I wouldn't be able to connect with other coffee producers around the globe and really share these types of ideas. And I think it's truly a blessing to be able to do that.
Yeah. Now let me ask you, because you won again the next time you competed, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And was that directly in 2020? Did that get interrupted by the pandemic or anything?
yeah. No, they got very interrupted. So it's it's funny because I won my first national in 20 end of 2019. That was valid for 2020. Then obviously COVID hit, and I ended up competing my first worlds in 2021, second semester of 2021. So
Right.
almost a year and a half waiting for competition. And obviously, I was very energetic. I was very motivated to keep going. I had a wonderful first experience in 2021 in Milan, uh, but it was a huge learning experience still. Like, I'm still a first time comer. Uh, the coffees that I've selected for that year weren't fully something that I was confident working with. So it gave me more motivation to keep going. And in the second year I competed, I focused a lot on genetics and learning more about varietals because through the first year of 2019 and 2021, when first time competing, I learned a lot about fermentation, but I also learned a lot about the limitations of fermentation. And one of the biggest limitations that I learned is that we need to focus on better genetics. as well. We need to have really high quality potential varieties that can also push fermentation into higher scope. So at that time, I was still working with a lot of the traditional Brazilian varietals like Mundo Novo, Catuais, that are very high quality. But in order to reach high level in competition, I think you need to push for better genetics. And at that time, I was studying lower caffeine varieties like Marinas, Ramosas. Also, we were seeing that huge rise at, I think, end of 2021 to 2022. So many people starting going to like non-alcoholic drinks, and I
Yeah.
felt that there was a good connection in terms of, hey, maybe coffee shouldn't be too related to caffeine anymore. And it's really a high quality beverage in that sense. So I had a lot of fun studying about low caffeine content coffees, about researches in terms of developing more low caffeine content in, varieties in Brazil, which is currently happening. And it was really interesting to learn a lot about coffee genetics.
Yeah. So you're exploring these scientific areas of coffee, and all of these have implications for what people are going to be doing with coffee in the future, because competition as a stage is a very influential place where people get ideas. I think really it came into focus when we have, Matt Perger with the EK43 in the back in the day, just kind of
Yeah.
the viral sensation that competition is, and the influence it has is both, it's almost a little scary, and also very helpful, because then
Yeah.
everybody gets this idea of what they should do. And so you have to measure the message that you're bringing, I imagine, with the idea that this is going to not stop at the stage, this is going to go out to other people. So when you're talking about these areas that you're experimenting with, I'm sure that's, crossing your mind, like, I want to see more of this in the world, and therefore that's what I'm going to talk about. It's not just that I'm interested in it; it's I feel like other people should be interested in it as well.
Yes. Yeah, I think overall our biggest objective has always been centralized towards I want people to be more interested about Brazilian coffees, but also really be able to support some of the biggest steps for improvement in quality for Brazilian coffee. So,
Hmm.
for example, in 2019, when we started talking about fermentation, it was the first time uh, we found out about a federal institute in Brazil who was trying to focus their studies in coffee fermentation. And at that time, nobody was giving them any attention. Um, I think we were probably one of the first private companies to to support their research and start really to dialogue about coffee fermentation as a positive thing. And today, this institute is working with some of the biggest Canephora and Robusta fermentation developments, published multiple works in coffee fermentation from Brazil. And I think that is such a huge positive impact in terms of knowledge and quality for Brazilian coffees. Uh, Also, promoting lower caffeine content coffees have always been something that we believe that will push better quality coffees from Brazil and push research institutes to study more about these genetic varieties. So it is absolutely with the objective of creating a better movement into higher quality Brazilian coffees for us.
Lovely. And so now let's get right into how you won the World Barista Championship, and I imagine the thinking that you had going into the next competition, and with this one where you had not only won your national title but now the world. The thinking must be similar, but the subject, from what I saw, was, yes, focused on coffee, of course, but also it was really focused on people, which is kind of fun that it brings us back to, earlier in our conversation talking about management and people, and that's an ingredient just like coffee. So talk a little bit about what was different this time around, and some of the keys that you believe brought you the victory of the world title.
Of course, of course. I think overall, I think funny enough, when I started competing and getting into world competition, I sort of had this timeline in my head that I would give myself sort of three opportunities at Worlds because I can't really be doing this for my entire life. And it was already our fourth year dedicated into competition. And since I kept thinking, like, okay, this is going to be my last time because it was my third time, I really wanted to celebrate the journey that I had. Obviously, the journey that we had as a team, especially because none of this could have been achieved alone. And none of this can be achieved alone today, for sure. And obviously, we learned many different things about coffee production. Are able to reach a amazing level of quality today from coffees from Brazil and coffees from our farms. And the objective really for me was to celebrate that idea. And for me to celebrate that idea, I have to talk about everyone who was involved.
Hmm.
So obviously, the partnership with different producers. For the last 2 years, we're able to work with an amazing coffee producer in Panama, Kai Jansen, who was truly a great friend today and helped us push our quality level by sharing a lot of information and some of his production philosophies. Um, and then we have all the amazing people who worked towards the competition with us. Uh, the roasters are all our team members, and coaches, the Canadian team, the Rosso brothers. They were all truly monumental to this journey. And I think that that needs to be celebrated more in our industry. So that was sort of the overall picture that I really wanted to give out for the last competition set.
And so it really was fun to win. I imagine, which you thought this is my swan song, this is my thing.
Yeah,
Like I don't expect to win. Maybe you did. I mean, you said you're competitive, and so maybe you're just like
yeah.
every time I'm gonna win, I'm gonna win. But how did you approach this? Was it truly just if this is going to be my last one, I just want the message to be awesome and the coffee to taste good, or was it also maybe I think this could win?
I think obviously you want to win, but today competition is it's so competitive that you don't go expecting to win. Um, I think obviously once you get into finals, you realize um, how almost anyone in that finalist panel could win. So it's really about giving.
You stopped recording. The only okay. Let's see. I'm gonna have you. Yes, I think so. Yeah. So rejoin. I'll stay here, and then yeah.
Okay, I think it's
Okay, there
back.
we go. Good.
All right.
So obviously, you want to win is where you were going with that
Yeah,
question.
yeah. I think obviously you want to win, um, but like I said, you don't really go expecting to win. I think most competitors who have been seasoned know the fact that once you get into competition, there's so many variables and there's so many different things that can happen. And honestly, the top six baristas are the best baristas in the world. The difference is really minimal. It's not really about who is the better barista in there. I think it's more about what is the better message and what can bring better positive impact to the industry. Uh, and I think for me, it was really about the objective of showcasing the people that helped me throughout my journey and serving amazing coffees and serving pretty much the culmination of the result of all of our work together. So our focus was not only in celebrating the people, but showing, look at what we were able to achieve with our teamwork, which
Mm.
were two coffees. Where one was the Panama Geisha from Jansen, and was the other one was a pink bourbon that we produce in our family farm. Uh, so those were two of our main objectives, and in our heads, we're like, okay, if the message is good enough, I think we can win. But uh, you definitely don't go in expecting to win.
It's a heartwarming message too that I think is brought into a stark uh, relief when you look at a place like the WBC with all of the teams and their friends, their family, representing different cultures, different takes on coffee. The idea is that people are there's a story behind every competitor, obviously, and
Yeah.
that is a deep and rich story that actually contributes to the strength. It's the kind of like the genetic diversity of our industry, socially speaking. And
Mhm.
so that being that your that was your message is really not just something for the world stage, but I imagine this is something that is pretty salient for people that you talk to just in cafes as you travel. They may not ever be a world barista champion, and their coffee shop might not have as many followers as the next person's cafe, but they're
Mhm.
still working with as a team to accomplish something. Do you find that this is kind of a pretty great message to bring to people as you travel that are just in regular coffee shops around the world?
Yes. Yeah, I think absolutely. The biggest thing is really about connecting to every level of our industry. I don't think I don't think only into the cafe side, but really encouraging different industry members to connect more. So just like we focus highly on improving our quality in the cafe side, but also thinking about production side, we want to encourage producers to talk more to cafe owners and talk more to baristas and understand what are some of the things that they're looking for. And I think that kind of teamwork really is what is going to push everyone up into our industry.
Lovely. That's awesome. Well, I'm really excited for you, and boy, just how much you've been traveling, it's dizzying. But I'm glad that this is the kind of message that you're bringing to the world. So, congrats again, and thank you for being on the show. Where can people
Thank you.
learn more about what you all do at Coffee Co. and the farm, and also
Yeah,
just keep up to date with where you are in the world these days?
of course. So yeah, people can definitely check out our Instagram pages. My Instagram is at Boram Uh, and then we have Coffee Co. for our cafes and roastery, and Fazenda Coffee Co. for our farm. So definitely we are always trying to put out some of the things that we're doing out there, and um, it's truly amazing to be able to connect with the industry globally today in a local level and meet not only the cafe owners but meet their customers. And I think that is what truly our industry is really about. It's all those connections.
Awesome. Well, Boram, thank you again for being on the show, making time in the middle of this tour. It really means a lot,
Thank you
and
so much.
all the best to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a true pleasure, Chris.